Chicago Bears select Caleb Williams, quarterback, Southern California.
What's up, Bears fans? Welcome back to the Willis Twin Towers podcast. Guys, it feels like it's been an eternity since I've seen you guys. I haven't been on in a few weeks. I know last week we took a week off in general, but I haven't been on in almost a month now. I came on just for a short time a few weeks back because of baseball, and then 2 weeks ago I missed because of baseball. So it's been a wild few weeks for me and in my house. So I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to see you guys again. Jeff is over here, and I know he's feeling a little bit under the weather, but just to introduce us again, guys, my name's Tim, and this to my right here is my brother, Jeff. Jeff, why don't you say hello to everyone?
How's everybody doing tonight? Like Tim said, I'm not feeling the best. I've had a little bit of a bug since last Saturday that I'm still kind of trying to get over. I'm a lot better than I was at the beginning of the week, but you guys can probably tell on my voice that I'm still not feeling the best, but nonetheless, we still appreciate you guys being here tonight. I'm sure you guys will be trickling in as we continue the show. But just a quick reminder to you guys, if you don't mind, give us a like on the video here. Give us a follow at Barroom Network, at Tim Willis 24. And of course, I'm at _ Jeff Willis. So like I said, guys, if you don't mind giving us that like McFack says there, I see you in there, McFack. You're here all the time. We appreciate you. And yeah, guys, we got some pretty good content for you here today. I know it's a bit of a slow season right now, but we've got some good topics to go over. And as usual, we urge you guys to, in the chats, come up with any kind of questions you have for us, whether it be about the Bears or about other sports or even, pop culture. Like, you guys know me and Tim are big rock music fans. So if you have any questions about that kind of stuff, about our opinions or anything like that, we'd love to share what we think. And we'd love to know what you guys think as well. So feel free, as always, to throw your comments and your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to them the best of our ability.
Yeah, but, you guys... Yeah. You'll quickly learn that, especially when it comes to music and things like that, Jeff is usually wrong. So it sparks really good debate, between the two of us, because I'm able to school him and all things like that. But anyway, don't want to get too much into that. But hey, real quick, I'll catch you guys up a little bit before we get into some Bears stuff, let you know where I've been. So like I said, baseball's kind of been a busy time of year for me. This is like the heart of the travel ball season. My 10-year-old son, Riker, plays travel ball. He plays on a pretty good team, and last 2 weekends, the 2 weekends that I wasn't on the show, the first one he had a Friday tournament, which he doesn't usually have, but it was Friday, Saturday instead of Saturday, Sunday. And then the very next week when I wasn't on at all, he was at a state tournament, which is all weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. He came up a little bit short Saturday, so they didn't make it to the championship game, but teams played really well, so they'd been on fire up to that point. They'd been in the championship game like 3 weekends in a row and won a couple tournaments. So we were a little more hopeful, but it is what it is. But anyway, outside of that, I don't know if you guys have had like any severe storms recently in Illinois, or in Chicagoland area or wherever you're from. But here in Terre Haute, I'm about an hour southwest of Indianapolis, and on Tuesday, we had a tornado that went right through my backyard, went right through our neighborhood. So just to give you guys a funny little story, I'll try to make this quick. I was just telling Jeff and Aldo before the show, but I'm driving my semi. I just finished my last stop of the day, and I'm only about 10 minutes, 15 minutes from my house where I'd finished up, but I have to drive all the way back to our lot, which is up north end of Terre Haute, which is about a 30-minute drive. But anyway, I'm driving, and I get within about a mile of my house, and my wife calls me. She's like, "Do you see this storm coming in?" And I look up at the sky. I was like, "Well, I didn't think it was storming. I just left, and it was bright, sunshiny. It was supposed to be really nice today, and all of a sudden, this storm is coming on us." And I look up at the sky, and it's pitch black. All of a sudden, I see all these red taillights in front of me. Everybody's hitting their brakes, pulling up the side of the road. I'm like, what is going on? The wind is whipping like crazy. My wife's like, hey, I'm going to take the boys and get them in cover here because there's funnel clouds in our neighborhood. All the neighbors are like running and hiding. So she takes the boys into the hallway and hangs up, and my trailer is just swaying back and forth. I felt like my truck was about to tip over. So I pull over to the side of the road. I get out. I'm like, here I am. I'm going to have to like hop into a ditch over here and hide out. But, because I'm right next to my semi too. If that hits me, I'm a dead man. So I hop out and I'm getting soaked. It's pouring down rain. She calls me back and she's like, everything's gone. Everything's gone, emotional and dramatic like women are. And I'm like, well, what is gone? What's gone? I'm thinking she's the house is gone is what she's getting at. But I'm like, I know better. We'll see what really happened. But, I'm prepared for the worst because of what she's saying. She's like, our shed in the backyard just blew off. It blew out and it's all the way in the neighbor's yard. It's in their house. Our shingles are off our house. Half of our shingles are gone. Our poles are coming out of the ground from our fence. Our fence is destroyed. The trampoline is destroyed. Our basketball hoop went down. Aldo's got a nice little picture. I believe that's from Oz, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, I get off the phone. I come home, and sure enough, my shed has been lifted off of where it is on the ground, and it's literally in my neighbor's. Went across my backyard into my neighbor behind me's house. There's big gash in their house. The shed is destroyed. It was a metal shed. When she said half the siding was gone, what really meant was there was literally 2 pieces of the siding that came off, but half the siding was gone. So, but anyway, there, some damage definitely could have been a lot worse, but it was so funny that the shed blew as far as it did. And, oddly enough, I have a really, really old motorcycle that sits in my shed. It's from I shouldn't say really, really old, but it's in 1983, I believe is the year it is. It's a really, really rare Kawasaki Spectre 550. And this, just to give you guys a little backstory, this bike was passed down between my dad and my uncle. My uncle bought it brand new, and he drove it for years. And then my dad bought it off him. He drove it. Then he'd sell it back to my uncle. My uncle would sell it back to my dad. And I would say about 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, my uncle sold it to my dad for the last time, and he's had it ever since. And now I have the bike. My dad's got a newer bike a few years back, so he gave me the bike because he wanted it to stay in our family. Because on the bike itself, on the gas tank, my Uncle Pete, my great uncle, which is my uncle's uncle, painted. My uncle has this tattoo of a snake that's draped around a sword that he got back in Michigan when tattoos were still illegal. And so he took this tattoo and he painted it on the gas tank of this bike. And he signed it, Pete Terrata right there on the bike. And so this bike has a ton of sentimental value for our family. And oddly enough, I'm not kidding. When I'm telling you everything in that shed got blown out of the shed or thrown out of the shed, scattered all over my yard, all over my neighborhood, that bike sat right where it was on the kickstand, did not move. The only damage, I believe, that's the bike right there.
That's the exact bike.
And it's stock. All the parts are stock on it still, except for maybe, spark plugs and things like that. So the bike has a lot of sentimental value. But anyway, everything is good on the bike except the speedometer has a crack right there in the glass. I'm hoping it's not the housing and it's just the glass, because that's replaceable. It's very hard to find parts for that bike. But yeah, oddly enough, and what are the odds that bike survived that and everything else got blown out and all over the place? So very, very fortunate that things didn't end up a lot worse than they were. But I just wanted to give you guys a little, backstory about what's been going on with me and let you guys know about that, because I thought that was really cool that happened. And, I don't know what you guys believe in, but I believe that was an act of God, that bike still stands where it's at. So, Jeff, what's been going on with you real quick before we get into some Bears football?
Well, like I just mentioned, you guys, I've been sick for like the last week. So I've really been kind of just laying low for the most part. I really haven't done much but work and then come home and go to the gym and pretty much go to sleep. So other than that, it's been a slow week for me. But I don't know if you guys, some of you guys were here a couple weeks ago. We had a show when Tim wasn't here, and it was with our resident NFL scout here in the bar room, Greg Gabriel. He joined me for a really good show. We went through a bunch of Bears stuff, and it was really just a really good show if you guys haven't seen it yet. So if you don't mind, you can go ahead and check that one out. Like I said, it's on Barroom Network's YouTube page and everywhere else where you get your podcasts at. So, and as always, we have a ton of good content on there. It's not just us. There's plenty of other shows. There's the weekend sports betting tips for you guys who like to gamble. Greg has his own show, Gabriel Talks Football, where he goes over the Bears roster and several other things related to scouting. And then there's, just like I said, there's several other shows. There's ones for the White Sox, South Burbs Hitmen. So there's a lot of stuff if you guys want to check that out. And as always, there's always great content on there for you guys to look out. So without further ado,
I want to give a little shout out real quick, Jeff. I shouldn't say shout out, but I don't know if you guys have watched, like a lot of you guys watch Greg's show and some of these other shows, but if you guys want to have a good laugh and listen to some Bears football, a little more on the raunchy side, but funny as all get out, go watch Dan and Aldo's show on Tuesday nights. That show gets me cracking up every time. It's a long one. It's usually 2.5, 3 hours, but it's got me laughing all the time. Like just some of the stuff they talk about, there's no holds barred, especially when it comes to Dan. And Dan and I don't really know each other personally, but that dude is hilarious. There's a lot of really funny stuff that comes out of that show. So if you guys want a good laugh on Tuesday nights and get to talk some Bears football or listen to some Bears football, go check out their show, Dan and Aldo, Bare Their Souls. So anyway, Jeff, let's go ahead and get into some Bears football. I think we've heard enough from me about what's going on with me in my life, but let's get into this. What's the big topic, in my opinion, right now that's kind of going around. If you guys watch CHGO or maybe like NBC Sports Chicago, he does a show on there sometimes at nights. Mark Carman, one of the hosts on CHGO, he posted on Twitter the other day about a little bit of an update on the Bears stadium situation. I'll go ahead and read it out loud. The Bears continue to work towards a resolution regarding property taxes with the school board in Arlington Heights on the land they own. Arlington Heights remains hopeful Bears will build their new stadium there. The Bears maintain their stadium focus remains on the museum campus in Chicago. And I'll go ahead and start with this, Jeff. To me, from the very get-go, before Kevin Warren was even brought in, this stadium, that piece of land in Arlington was purchased specifically to build the stadium. You don't spend hundreds of millions of dollars on this big plot of land just to be a landowner. The whole goal from the very beginning was to build a stadium there, and everybody knew that. They were obvious about that, and they made it known that they were going to build a stadium there. And then the whole property tax issue happened with the school districts, and basically, to make it as easy as I can put this, the problem is they're trying to charge the city of Arlington Heights is trying to charge more taxes to the Bears than what they were paying for the race, than the people who own the racetrack were paying for that land before, which makes no sense because there's no racetrack there anymore. The land is bare. It's empty. How can you value the land is worth more now than it was then? That's the big part of the problem. Basically, it's just, the school districts in Arlington Heights kind of trying to strong arm the Bears. So in comes Kevin Warren, the master negotiator. So what does he do? This is a battle that they've been fighting, and they haven't been able to make any ground on the negotiations to get the property taxes down some, because the Bears are going to fully pay for this stadium. And so all they're asking for is for the city of Arlington Heights, their tax money, to help pay for the infrastructure surrounding the stadium and all of the other things that the stadium will bring in. If you guys have seen some of the layout for the things they plan, there's a lot of things that are going to be for the community. So that's all that the Bears are asking for, is tax money to pay for that. So that's their big issue. Is like, well, the Bears are thinking, well, we're trying to, build a stadium, and we're going to cover the cost for it. All we're asking for is this, and you guys want to charge us all these taxes. So again, here comes Kevin Warren, and in the mastermind that he is, says, okay, well, how can we, build our negotiations up here? How can we kind of, we're being strong armed. How can we strong arm back? Maybe this is a little bit of a mistake and a fall by Ted Phillips in this whole negotiation process, not thinking of this before. But Kevin Warren meets with the mayor of Chicago and gets a good relationship with him and decides, hey, let's go ahead and talk about building a stadium here in Chicago and just move it over from where it's at. And we'll build on the museum campus, which everybody knows that there has been an issue with the, I can't think of the environmentalist group.
EPA.
No, not the EPA. That
I'm
group,
sorry.
You guys, I'll think of it here in a minute. But
Friends of the Park.
Friends of the Park. Thank you. Friends of the Park has been fighting this for months now, or for years. They don't want the Bears to build in that area. They own that land. They don't plan on getting rid of it, and they don't want to change it. What they believe is a national monument as far as the land goes. So Kevin Warren, again, he decides, okay, let's go talk to this mayor, and they work out a plan to build a stadium on the museum campus, knowing full well that there's not been approval or anything like that, but just as a negotiation tactic. Obviously, the state legislature has battled that, and they're not, they're like, well, they can make up the stadium plans all they want and talk about how they want to build here. It's not going to happen until they get approval from us and whatnot, yada, yada, yada. But the Bears have stayed steadfast in their plan now to build on this museum campus. And I believe truly that Kevin Warren probably does want to build on the museum campus. But there's a lot of things that go against that. Number one, there's been issues for years with traffic and parking at Soldier Field. And that isn't really going to improve a whole awful lot by building on the museum campus and moving the stadium. Number one. Number two, the seating capacity for the new stadium, if I'm not mistaken, is either less or maybe just a little bit more than what Soldier Field is now, which is another huge problem with Soldier Field. There isn't enough seating. And there's not, that's a big problem. If you want to have a Super Bowl, you have to have more seating. That's one of the big stipulations. So anyway, now what we're hearing with Arlington Heights, they're hearing all of this, and they're hearing that there's other towns, other cities in the surrounding area of Chicago that also would like to build the stadium there. And so they're trying to get the stadium built there. Pardon guys, I'm sorry, my kid just ran in here. But they're trying to they want to build the stadium. So now Arlington Heights is like, okay, we hear you out. Let's do some negotiating. Just my opinion, but this is kind of where it's going. So possibly now what I'm guessing is this has become more of a negotiation tactic. And now the Bears they're going to say that they're still planning on building in the museum campus, but in reality, they plan on building in Arlington Heights. And now they're starting to finally gain some headway here. And I think that's what this post is about from Mark Carman and the information that he's getting.
Okay, so real quick before I want to get to some of you guys' comments on this, but before I do that, I just want to kind of share my quick piece. I have kind of two trains of thought on this. So the first one is that, when you spend, as Tim mentioned before, when you spend hundreds of millions of dollars on this property, not only to purchase the property, but then to go ahead and tear down everything that was on top of the property to begin with. Now you've spent all this money to do something with this property. You don't just want to let it go for nothing. You have this for a reason. You want to do something with it. And now the fact of the matter is, this all happened before Kevin Warren came and took over. This was in the works when Ted Phillips was still the president. Now, that being said, when Kevin Warren came in, okay, this is my kind of other train of thought here. There's a part of me that thinks that, yeah, maybe Kevin Warren does want to have the property on the lakefront still, okay? Because, Chicago's beautiful. He's talked about how he likes the cranes in the sky and how that's an important thing to him and all these other things. And yeah, sure, a lot of people would like to have it on the lakefront. Maybe you could see the skyline. But the fact of the matter is, in my opinion, I think that it may not be a total negotiation tactic here, but there's obviously some of that going on because, like I said, you don't want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to not keep this property and use it for something. And that was the whole goal, was to build the stadium there, to have basically a complex around the stadium with all kinds of shops and eateries and things like that, to make this not just a football stadium experience, but to make it an experience that, for the whole family to do something to do outside of just the game on game day. So there's a lot that goes in it. Not to mention, not only just that, and you could do this on the lakefront too, but you want a stadium that you can hold other significant events at, like a Super Bowl, like, concerts and things like that you can't do at Soldier Field because it's not in a dome. And when it's cold, you can't do those kinds of things. And like I said, you could still do that on the lakefront too, but you're talking about owning this property at Arlington Heights, and it's your own if you're the Bears to do whatever you want with it. That would not be the case on the lakefront in Chicago. You're not going to own that stadium, so you're not going to own that property. So I think that's a big part of this. And to be fair, I do think that part of this is a negotiation tactic, but I also do think that maybe Kevin Warren does want to have this property on the lakefront. But at the same time, like I said, guys, they're not going to waste all that money. So I think the end game here, what they're trying to do is to find a way to lower that tax threshold so that they can use that property to build on Arlington Heights. And I think that's what most fans want. So let me get to some of your guys' comments on here. I have to go through some of these, but Plank says he feels like Arlington makes the most sense for the organization. He understands everyone's attachment to Lakefront, but feels it's better to own. He likes the job that Warren is doing so far. And I agree with you, Plank. I think Arlington makes the most sense for the organization, too, for the reasons I just mentioned. Number one, because they spent a ton of money on it. And number two, because they're going to own it and they can do whatever they want with it. They can turn it into whatever they want to do. And it's going to have more space than you would have on just the lakefront there. You can do so much more with it. Not to mention, it's not going to be right in the middle of hustle bustle downtown, where it's more open, more open space and more easily, maybe not easily, more easy to get there, but it's going to be more easily to commute within that area, if that makes sense to you guys. So I think that's an important thing too. I mean, you might not have to necessarily drive through the city of Chicago if you're from surrounding areas there. So I think that's a thing to keep in mind also. Another comment here, Windy City makes, that he spoke to a source who was instrumental in getting the stadium built in Milwaukee for the Bucks and the $500 million referendum for the Brewers. And he says the Lakefront Stadium is a dead deal. Hey, I don't know if that's true or not, Windy City. I would imagine that you know, I'm not going to tell you your source is not credible. I believe what you're saying. So what I would say to that is I don't know that it's a dead deal, but I will say I do think that it's a big part of this is a negotiation tactic to help lower that tax threshold at Arlington Heights, because I do believe that's what they really want to do, is put that property there. And even though Kevin Warren is the president, we have to remember that he's not the chairman. He's not, you know, he's not George McCaskey. He's not any of these other boards of any of the other people on the board of directors who were initially part of this Arlington Heights project. So we have to remember that even though Kevin Warren is in charge here, I'm sure they're telling him, like, look, this is what we want. We want to be in Arlington Heights. This is what we initially planned. And there's reasons for this. So again, being the negotiator that he is and being the businessman that he is, I believe that's a big part of this process, is trying to figure out how we can get Arlington Heights to lower that tax dollar. And part of that is by using the city of Chicago and the lakefront as a negotiating tactic. Is, well, we could go here, guys. And then what? Then you're not going to have anything there. Now you're not going to make money on this stuff. Now you're not going to have a nice, you know, opportunity to, like I said, make money in that area and build a community well, and, you know, have a lot of people from outside the area spending money in your city. So look, I agree with that. Like Aldo says here in the chat, I agree with Windy City source. I think that probably is true. And it would make sense for that to be the case, in my opinion. So again, I don't want to say it's totally a negotiating tactic, because I do think there's a part of Kevin Warren that does want to have the stadium on the lakefront still, just because it's Chicago, you know, and, you know, you want your Bears to be in Chicago and on the lakefront with the skyline and all those things, but it just makes so much more sense to do this in Arlington for all the reasons we already mentioned here. So let me see if there's any more comments in here that were in regard to this before I move on. I'm not really seeing a whole bunch.
Well, I'll just really quick, Jeff. I want to talk about that really quick with the stadium and that dead deal thing. I don't know for sure that it is a dead deal, but I would lean more towards that it is. And the reason I say that is because I live in Indiana, and things are a little bit different in Indiana when it comes to legislature and things passing. It is really, really hard to get things to pass through Illinois legislature. That entire political realm it's just a different animal. I live 5 minutes, well, about 10 minutes east of the Illinois border, and just the way that things are done there are so much different than they are here. And honestly, most of the people that live on that side of the state line hate living in Illinois because of a lot of the mandates and the taxes and the legislature and the laws and the way that they operate. No business of mine. I don't care how they operate there. I don't live in Illinois. But because of that, I think it's just really difficult to get things like this passed. And especially in Chicago, the biggest city in Illinois, I'm sure that it's even more difficult to get things to pass there. So to me, it's one of those things where I'm laughing at that comment too. You have to look at the scenario and say, okay, well, what is the easiest option here for me to get this stadium built? Because the longer this takes, like Kevin Warren has said many times, it's going to get more expensive and cost more money to get this thing done and get this thing built. All these costs and all these fees are just going to keep rising. So to me, the fastest avenue is 100% Arlington Heights because, for one, they already own the land. Two, they are already in the works for the process, and they've already torn that. Right now, if they wanted, they could start. They could put a shovel in the ground tomorrow at Arlington Heights. They can't do that in the museum campus. And the other part of this that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about, the Bears clearly want to own their own stadium. If it is built on the museum campus, they still will not own that property. It will be owned by the city of Chicago. So to me, honestly, in my opinion too, I think Arlington Heights is the better option. You know, I don't have those same ties to Chicago and Soldier Field and where it's at because I don't live there. I've never lived in that area. I've been to that area many times and visited, but I don't live there. I don't have the same emotional ties as some people might. To me, I don't really care about it being on the lakefront. That's not, to me, that's not a big deal. It's a lake. I mean, I get it. It's, you know, Lake Michigan and all these things, and people love that area. But to me, Arlington Heights just offers you more from many, many perspectives. Number one, again, they own the land. Number two, what they're able to do with that property, it's a much bigger space, much more wide open. They can make a bigger stadium with more seating. They can do all the same infrastructure that they want to do in the museum campus and then some. They're able to build more of a surrounding area to it where they can add more things to it and really grow that area and really explode on the scene with all the different things that they can do there. And to top it off, they, like I said, they could start building tomorrow. So there's just a lot of things that go into this. And I think that Arlington Heights just offers a better opportunity for the Bears to build. And again, they want to have a Super Bowl and things. That capacity is a big deal. And if they don't have that stadium capacity, it's not going to happen. So even if it is in Chicago, even if it is a closed roof, you still have to have the seating capacity. And I don't know if they will get that at the museum campus where they can 100% get it in Arlington Heights, and they can improve the parking, which is obviously a huge problem here in the city of Chicago around Soldier Field and getting to games in general because of traffic and the way that things go there. So
one more thing real quick, Tim, before you move us on to the next topic. Don Burr had an interesting little comment in here where he says the Arlington Heights Bears. And Don, I know you're trolling us. And so first of all, for you guys that don't know, Don is the resident Barroom Network Detroit Lions fan who has nothing better to do but watch Bears podcast because for whatever reason, he must not watch his Lions podcast because I don't know how he would have time to do that when he's always on all these Barroom podcasts talking about the Bears. So
just Barroom, he's on everybody, all Bears content.
That's what I'm saying. And in regards to your Arlington Heights Bears comment, Don, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the fact that there are several teams in many sports who play in a different city than the city that they're named after. The San Francisco 49ers are a prime example of that. They play in Santa Clara, California. Which
the Dallas Cowboys play in Arlington, Texas, ironically.
It happens that way with several teams. The Florida Panthers, you heard people talking about the city of Miami and how they play in Miami. Well, they don't technically play in Miami, but there was this big brouhaha about that fact because they don't play in that city. And the fact of the matter is there are several teams all over the place that do this. It would not just be the Bears. They're still going to call themselves the Chicago Bears, whether or not they're in Arlington Heights or not. That's just how it is. The Patriots, they're not the Boston Patriots, but still they play in Foxborough. They don't, you know what I mean? They're not playing in the city of Boston, but the people in Boston are Boston fans of theirs. So that's just the fact of the matter. That's how it works. And there's several teams that do that and for a variety of different reasons. So, you know, I don't know why I don't understand the trolling there because you know, like I said, so many teams do this and it's not just football, it's several other sports too. So whatever you can say whatever you want, Don. And I know you like to tease about how the Bears haven't won a lot lately, but your Lions haven't won a championship since 1957. So let's just keep that in mind as well. Go ahead, Tim, move us on to our next time.
Better part of a half a century. So anyway, let's move on from stadium talk. I know there was a lot into that. And hopefully, you know, we'll find out some more things here in the near future, but let's go into this. Pete, I don't know if you guys have heard this, but Pete Prisco, I believe he's with CBS Sports. He put out a top 100 player list in the NFL. And if you guys haven't seen this yet, there are, in fact, 3 Bears players that did make the top 100 on this list. Aldo's got a nice graphic here for you. The highest, of course, of the 3 is Jalen Johnson at number 34. And that may sound a little low for him, but, you know, after looking at the list, I think it's pretty accurate. I know they've got Trent McDuffie and one other corner ahead of Jalen Johnson. I honestly think he's better than Trent McDuffie, but here we are. He's at number 34. Montez Sweat at number 73 and DJ Moore at 84. I almost read that the way it was printed out, and I thought I didn't. But so DJ Moore. Now, this is the one. Before we get into a whole lot of this, Jeff, I just want to, there's some snubs in here, I'm sure. But I wanted to go ahead and talk about DJ Moore for a second, because I thought number 84, though it doesn't sound super low, considering, there's in top 100 players, there's a lot of really good players. I saw some of the wide receivers that he had rated ahead of DJ Moore, and that was almost laughable to me. And Don Burr, you're going to love this, but he has Amon-Ra St. Brown ahead of DJ Moore. And I'm sorry, I don't see anywhere, this is not biased. I would have told you this last year before he even came to Chicago. DJ Moore is a better wide receiver than Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra is very good, but DJ Moore can do a whole lot more different things than Amon-Ra can. And the production speaks for itself, even without good quarterback play. Amon-Ra's never had inconsistent quarterback play since he was drafted by the Lions. He's had the same quarterback the entire time. DJ Moore has been through the gauntlet of quarterbacks. So many different quarterbacks he's had to work with and play with and, create a rapport with. And he's done nothing but have tremendous success. And the numbers don't lie. He's put up numbers every year. Every year he's been consistent with it. So
with not good quarterback play either.
Yeah, and I don't have. I wish I had the list right now in front of me of all the wide receivers that were rated ahead of DJ Moore, but there were several, and it's not good. I honestly believe that he was better than several of those guys, but I wanted to get into that really quickly because I kind of thought that was a little bit of a low spot. I don't know about the number per se at 84, but definitely of the receivers ahead of him, I did not agree with at all. So I don't know if you looked into this at all, Jeff, or what your thoughts are on it, but really quickly, what are your thoughts on the three that are in the top 100 on Pete Prisco's list?
I would say, so first off, I would say Jalen Johnson's spot at 34. I think that's pretty accurate. I think he's certainly one of the top corners in this game. And, at 34, that's a pretty damn high number. So I'm not too upset with that number. I think Montez Sweat is a little underrated. And the reason I say that is not so much because I think a lot of people are going to look at the overall production in general and the fact he's not like a 18 to 20 sack guy. But I mean, there's not a lot of guys that are like that. He still had 12 sacks last year. But the reason I say that I think he's a little underrated is because he's such a multiplier for the defense. And you guys all saw the impact that he had on the Bears defense when he got here. I mean, they totally turned the defense around when he showed up. They started to put more pressure on the quarterback. The defenses overall started playing better, started limiting opponents more as far as their offensive output. And just everything about him makes the guys around him better. They were just the way he plays, the way he leads. And I thought it was kind of interesting. If you guys didn't see this tweet, he put up a tweet the other day in regards to, I can't remember who it was that said it, but there was a Packers, I think it was a former Packers quarterback. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Kurt Benkert, said something along the lines of, he was talking about how the Bears have not had very good success against the Packers lately. And Montez Sweat said something along the lines of like, yeah, well, we'll see what happens the next coming years kind of thing. Like, we're coming for you in essence. And I love that. I love that confidence. And it shows, to me, that's a true leader who's going to say, hey, let's go out and get this job done. Let's go out and show what we can do and not be afraid to say it, because then it kind of does put a little bit of a target on your back. And if you got that target on your back, you better be ready to put up or shut up. And
well, I mean, the guy played not even half a season with the Bears, and they played one. He's only played one game against Green Bay, and the first things he said was, "Man, I ain't losing to Green Bay again." Like, that's how much that rivalry already means to him, and that tells me something right there where he stands. And I can't wait to see that rub off on the rest of the team. Sorry for cutting you off, Jeff. Go ahead.
Finish. No, you're good. So. Yeah, I agree. I think he's a little underrated from that aspect. But like I said, to me, it's not so much because of the overall production and the numbers per se, but just because of the impact that he has on the defense and the fact that he's such a multiplier as far as the way he brings up everybody else's play around him. I think it's such an underrated aspect of players today. And in regards to DJ, I do think he's also a little underrated. I've thought he's always been underrated for his entire career, though. The guy has never had a quarterback who's put up big numbers, especially before he got to Chicago. The quarterbacks he had in Carolina were not very good for the most part. I mean, he had Cam Newton for a couple years, I believe. And Cam Newton did have, a year or two where he was a pretty damn good player, but he really kind of fell off towards the end too. And outside of that, he did not have anybody who was any good throwing to him. So we got to remember, he's been doing nothing but putting up production in bad offenses with bad quarterbacks. And last year, Justin obviously had his shortcomings, but the fact of the matter is he was still able to produce with DJ Moore. I mean, DJ Moore put up huge numbers last year with the Bears, probably the best year of his career. And I only think that that's going to get better in the future. I mean, the guy is a tremendous player. I've said this before on the podcast many times. I don't think DJ Moore ever catches a ball without breaking at least one tackle. The guy is so incredibly hard to bring down. And the fact he's such a threat everywhere. I mean, he'll beat you deep. He'll beat you in the middle of the field. He'll beat you after he catches the ball, breaking tackles. And yeah, he might not score a ton of touchdowns, but he's going to get the ball a lot just because they're going to throw it to him so much because he's open all the time. And even if he's not, he's going to find a way to get open and make the catch. He's not a huge guy, but he plays a lot bigger than he is. So I think, Don made a comment that he's a number 2, and I've heard that a lot from other people lately. But I don't know how you say a guy who has 1,500, 1,600 receiving yards is a number 2 option. That's just insane to me, especially when he had nobody else on the team that was putting up those kinds of numbers. So the fact of the matter, in my opinion, I think DJ Moore is absolutely a number 1 receiver. He might not be the best receiver in the league, but he is up there. To me, he is a top 10 receiver. And I'm not sure I totally agree with your point that he's better than Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra is a damn good player. And it pains me to say that with Don Burr here in the chats, he's a very, very good player. But I mean, DJ Moore is right there. I mean, he's not far off. He really isn't. They're both fantastic football players. And like I said, to say he's a number 2, I just don't agree with that. He's a very good player. And the one thing I want to add to this before we switch it over and talk about something else is what I'm interested to see is when the NFL top 100 list comes out that's voted by the players. I want to know what the other players think about some of the players that the Bears have. In particular, DJ Moore, Montez Sweat, Jalen Johnson. I want to see if any of the other players on the team are going to make that list. I don't think here's one guy that I'm really interested to see both how he's going to play this year and what other guys think about him now is Darnell Wright. Because I know without a shadow of a doubt that there are several players that went up against him, defensive linemen, and had a difficult time with him last year. And I know that some of those guys are going to vote for him and say, hey, man, this guy, I'm telling you, he's coming and he's going to be a really good player. I'm not going to say he's going to make the top 100 list now because he kind of did have a little bit of an up and down season. But just the fact that he shut down several top tier pass rushers last year and let them do nothing against him shows that he has a very, very bright future. And I think that there's several players in the league that would attest to that. So I'm interested to see how that's going to turn out and how many other guys actually get on that list and how the other players around the league view Bears players. So that's just my opinion. And look, Don, he says Wright is okay. He's no Penny Sewell. Look, Penny Sewell is an established veteran, number 1, and Penny Sewell is one of the best tackles in the game. Okay, so I'm not going to argue that point. But Darnell Wright absolutely has the upside to be right there with him. And I would not be shocked at all if that guy is an all-pro in the coming years because he's going to be very, very, very good too. He's going to be there, right there with, he may be not quite as good as Sewell now, but I would not be surprised if he's right there with him the next 2 to 3 years because he's a great player. He's on the way. I'm telling you, he's on the way to being that guy. He was a stud last year. He shut down Aiden Hutchinson last year. He shut down Rashawn Gary last year. He shut down Myles Garrett last year. The guy does nothing but shut people down. Yeah, I think Garrett got him once. But at the end of the day, like I said, you're talking about premier pass rushers that are being shut down by a rookie right tackle. The guy is mean. He is just a dog on the field. Dude, the way he plays with such a mean streak, and he's going to go out there and give you everything he's got. He's a mauler in the run game. And for a rookie, he was very good in pass pro. So I'm excited to see what he does. And like I said, I'm excited to see what the other players around the league think about him because I think it's only a matter of time before he's on that top 100 list. So go ahead, Tim. Whatever we got next, let's move on here.
I was just going to say really quickly, there's a couple of players that were probably snubbed on this a little bit. You don't see TJ Edwards on there. You don't see Keenan Allen. You don't see Cole Kmet on this list. Those are a couple.
Keenan Allen's a bit surprising.
Keenan Allen's, and if you saw some of the other players on this list, you'd be really surprised. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. Let's move on to if you guys have seen where the Bears, there's a couple sites, ESPN and PFF both rank the Bears roster PFF has the roster ranked the 20th best in the NFL, and ESPN has them as the 17th best in the NFL. And before I go over to Jeff really quickly, guys, there are not 16 rosters in the NFL better than the Chicago Bears. They're both saying that they're in the bottom half of roster of players on the roster. I find that insane because on paper, the Bears look maybe the best team in the division. Maybe the Lions have a better roster on paper, but it's an awfully good one. And, you know, one of the better ones in the NFL. You know, the wide receiver room is elite. The corner room is elite. The tight end room is elite. The linebacker room is elite. You know, we're going to go over that here in a little bit. But to me, like, where in the world do you see them as the 17th and the 20th best rosters in the NFL? I understand they have to prove it. You can't say, you know, they're this good or whatever because they have to prove it at the same time. But for this exercise, you're putting it on paper. So you have to say who are the best. You're telling me there's 16 teams better on paper than the Chicago Bears right now? You can't base it on last year. This is a new season. So you can't say, well, the New York Jets are number one on paper because blah, 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 or, you know, the best team in the NFL. You know, you can say that because it's on paper, you know, whatever. But at the same time, I don't understand who thinks that there are 16 teams better than the Bears on paper. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Bears fan. I'm just looking at the roster in totality. I don't see 16 rosters in the NFL that are better than the Bears. I see 2 rosters in the division that are worse than the Bears. I think the Packers are a pretty darn good team, but I still believe that the Bears have a better roster than the Packers do, and they certainly have a better roster than the Minnesota Vikings. But 16 teams? Or according to PFF, 19 teams have a better roster? I'm sorry. I don't see it. Jeff, I'll pass it on to you because I feel like I'm wasting my time arguing with this one because I feel like those are both just asinine to believe that.
Well, I got a couple of things to say. The first thing is I can't stress this enough. You mentioned a couple of times, Tim, on paper. And let me just say this. On paper, yeah, I would agree that from what we've seen the Bears do so far this offseason, on paper, the roster should be very, very good. It should be a top 15 unit, in my opinion, maybe even a top 10 unit. And I do expect them to grow on the 7 wins they had last year. I think I told you guys before, I expect somewhere around 10 wins this year. So what I would say to that is this. You got to go out there and prove it on the field. And until the Bears do that, I understand why they're ranked at 17th or whatever they are. Now, like I said, I think we're all in agreement that the Bears have totally upgraded the roster this offseason, and they should be a better team next year. But again, until they go out on the field and prove it, it's hard to just say, hey, they're a top flight unit because we don't know that yet. We don't know it until we see it. Now, the defense has shown that. They've proven that they're a top 10 defense. And they've done enough, I think, they didn't have to add too much this offseason to show that they're still a top 10 unit. Now, that being said, I do think we still have a need at edge, and they need to get an established player in there who can at least hold his own. That's why I keep telling you guys I would not be surprised to see Ngakoue come back because I think it only makes sense. He's been here before. It's a fit, and he might not give you huge numbers, but before last year, he was an 8-sack guy every year, 8 to 10 sacks every year. So if we can get that out of him again and have, sprinkle in Austin Booker, who has tremendous upside, and I think he's going to have a handful of sacks this year too. Maybe not a ton, but I would expect somewhere around 3 to 5. At least I hope so. You're talking about a defense who could be top 5, especially if they get enough of a pass rush. Now, again, that being said, this is all on paper. We don't know until we see it on the field. Okay. But there was another point I wanted to make. And the other one was that, you're looking at the PFF had them graded 20th. I always take anything as far as PFF grading with a grain of salt because you got to take a couple things in mind here with PFF, guys. Their grades that they use, they have an algorithm for this, that the way they grade things, and they're never going to take into account the scheme, what a player's job is within the scheme, what that player is supposed to be doing on the field, how he's coached. They don't take any of that stuff into account because they don't know. All they're doing is looking at the film and grading it based on that, based on what they're seeing. as far as those things. Now, there are some accuracies in there, of course. There's always going to be some things you take from that. I'm never going to say we got to totally discredit PFF because it is a tool. It's a tool to use, but it's not the end all be all. So just because they have them ranked 20th doesn't mean jack shit to me. All it means is that's it. They have their opinion on how guys are graded. But again, they have no clue what anybody's jobs or responsibilities are and how they're coached or any of that. So we have to keep that in mind. Now, again, like I said, on paper, I expect us to be better. But again, we got to go out on the field and prove it. And I've said it many times already today now, but that's just the way it is. And until that happens, we can't just say they're a top unit, or except for the defense. You can say the defense is a top unit because they've shown that. But overall, as a team, they won 7 games last year, and that's a bottom half team. I hate to say it, guys, but a 7-win team is a bottom half team. And until we go out on the field and show that we are more than that, you have to understand where these analysts are coming from with this. You really just do. But I do think, like I said, I do think that we've improved enough to where when they get on the field, I totally expect them to be a better team than that, and I expect them to be a top half team. Maybe even a top 10 team. It just depends on how the offense comes around. And I mentioned to you guys the X factors to me before already. And before we move on, I just want to get this out real quick. Like I said about the defense, I still think they need a pass rusher to help that really take the next big step to become an elite defense. But offensively, my biggest concern has always been the offensive line. Right now, I mean, we have, I think, a cornerstone piece in Darnell Wright, who's only going to get better and better. And I think that that's a huge part of this offensive line growing and being great. I think Braxton Jones this is a big year ahead for him right now. And if I'm going to be honest with you guys, I expect him to take a big step this year. And the reason I think that is because, number one, he's had 2 years in this offense. He's gotten steadily better each year. And as you guys have heard Greg talk about on his show many times, and as if you haven't already, if you're just familiar with the situation, the kid went to Southern Utah. He has never played high-level football in his life until he got to the Chicago Bears. And he held his own from the time he was a rookie as a 5th-round pick through last year. The guy has played really, honestly, pretty damn good football, all things considered. So I expect him with his traits, with the length, the athleticism, the makeup, I totally expect him to take a big jump this year. And especially because the fact he's got Karan Amagaji bringing down his neck now. And that guy could, there's a reason they brought him in to compete. He could slide inside. He could play tackle. He's got those kinds of traits too. So with Braxton Jones competing with him, I expect Jones to take that next step, knowing I got this guy behind me. And if I don't play better football, I might not be here in a couple years. So I got to improve. And I expect him to do so. Now, the last thing I want to say before we move on is it regards the interior here. Okay. And I've told you guys this before. The biggest concern I have on the interior is the injury history. Okay. Tevin Jenkins has not shown that he can stay healthy. When he is healthy, he's a beast. He's a damn good player on the field. He had a horrible game against Green Bay last year. But outside of that, he's been a pretty damn good player against everybody he plays. He's a mauler in the run game. He holds his own in pass pro. Like I said, though, when he's healthy. So I need to see him stay healthy in order to not have concern there. Nate Davis also had some issues last year. New team. He was dealing with some offseason issues that kind of went under the radar. And so I can understand why he did not play necessarily as well last year, but he wasn't bad. He still played pretty well, but I expect him to play better this year. And if he doesn't, that's a serious concern now. And you're probably moving on from him after 2 years. The center deal is a little bit of a concern too. Ryan Bates has never been a full-time center. Okay, he played guard last year. Coleman Shelton is a center, and he started last year. He played pretty well. I like that they have competition there. I think they brought in Bates with the expectation he would win that job. But I still think we have a little bit of a concern in that interior there, how well they're going to hold up and how healthy they're going to stay. Because if they can't stay healthy, then I'm a little concerned about what things are going to look like for Caleb and how well they can protect him. And that's going to be the X factor for me for the offense, is how well that offensive line can perform. Because we have so many weapons now on offense with all the receivers and the tight end room and the running back room. So I don't want, like I said, I don't want to spend any more time on this because we got one more topic we want to get to. And then I want to get you guys' questions for us at the end. So go ahead, Tim, and get us on to the next topic here.
But really quickly before we do that, Jeff or Aldo, do you possibly know where the Jets roster is ranked, just out of curiosity?
Well, it's Aaron Rodgers is there, so I'm sure they're going to have him totally hyperbolic as far as their rating. So
my point exactly, though. The point of the exercise of ranking these teams is on paper. And I don't disagree with you, Jeff. The Bears have to prove it on the field. But the exercise is on paper. What are the 32 best, or what are the best rosters from 1 to 32? And I don't understand how you could rank the Bears 17th and 20th. The Jets are number 4, Aldo says. Number 4. What have the Jets done to prove they are the 4th best team? It's on paper. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is what I'm talking about. If you got to prove it on the field, what have the Jets done to prove that? Because they got Aaron Rodgers? He played for 4 minutes last year. He's done.
That's why I said that you got to take PFF ratings with a grain of salt, because that's not an end all be all. But I agree. Right. That's absolutely effing insane.
That's
that they
just
haven't
what I knew that the Jets would be in the top 10. I knew it. So that's why I asked that. But anyway, I want to get it. So just to go on along with that for our next topic, they kind of blend together. Ben Devine had a tweet recently, and he was talking about how, I believe Aldo can pull it up on the screen for us here in a second, but here it is. The Bears have 4 elite position groups. That's rare indeed in today's NFL. The wide receivers with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze. The linebackers with Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, and Jack Sanborn. The corners with Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon, and Tyreek Stevenson. And then the tight ends, Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, and Mercedes Lewis. That is a very, very good team. Now, the one that kind of surprised me was he called the tight end room elite. And I kind of thought, yeah, I don't know if you can necessarily call them elite, but as far as like 2 tight ends that are really, really good together, that might be an elite tight end room, because how
all
good
3 of them
and Gerald Everett both are. And Mercedes Lewis in his career has played forever, and he's still one of the best blocking tight ends in all of football. So, yeah, I mean, that kind of goes along with my point with the rankings. You got 4 elite position groups, 4. And, 2 of them are on the offensive side of the ball, and 2 of them are on the defensive side of the ball. That's pretty good numbers there. Again, going into the roster, you've got, and it's not like these guys they don't have rookies on this list. All of those players that were just mentioned, with the exception of Rome Odunze, are all veteran players. So those are elite position groups based on what those guys have already done in this league. I'm on a tangent now because I'm a little bit peeved at the rankings, which I shouldn't be, but it's like, why can't the Bears get any respect whatsoever? I understand they got to prove it on the field, but Jets haven't proven anything on the field either. And that was exactly what my point was with that. So, Jeff, I don't know if you want to get into this a little bit more or not, or if you want to move on to our last topic before we get into some questions. But I just kind of thought that was a little bit ironic that we have that, that tweet from Ben Devine showing all those elite position groups, and then, where is our ranking at?
Well, I would just say I'm in agreement with him for most of that. We got to see what Rome can do, but I do think if he's anywhere near the player we expect him to be, I think the Bears will have an elite wide receiver room, because that's 3 top tier receivers there.
I think with DJ and Keenan Allen, it's already an elite position group, because those are
for the most part, yeah. They're if nothing else, they're very, very good.
Yes.
The corner group is absolutely elite, and it's not just because of who's at the top; it's the overall depth. We got to remember Terrell Smith came in last year and filled in with injury and played very well. They've got Josh Blackwell and Jalen Jones, who've both been there since Ryan Poles got there as undrafted free agents, and they both played well. Blackwell's a special teams ace, and Jalen Jones has played well when he's come in as well, when he's had to back up Kyler Gordon. And, on top of that, Gordon is such a good nickel. He's basically like a linebacker. So that really makes the linebacker group even better than that too, because when Sanborn's not in and Gordon's in there, he's not afraid to stick his nose in there and tackle somebody. So you're talking about, yeah, I agree, especially with the way the linebacker group played last year between Edwards and Edmonds, especially at the end of the season. They really started to come along. And as far as the tight end group, I do think that's an elite group, because you're talking about maybe you don't have one guy in there that's a top tier guy at the very Cole Kmet's pretty damn good. I think you could argue he's a top 10 player. But when you talk about all 3 of those guys and the roles that they're going to play, I think it's absolutely an elite group. Gerald Everett's proven to be a great pass catcher in this league. Well, maybe not great, but he's a very good one. And, we all know how good of a blocker Mercedes Lewis is as well. So I just, that's what I think. I think that's I think they do have some elite position groups there, and it's going to make a big difference for them. So I tend to agree with that list. I think for the most part, he's right about that. And I do want to make a quick mention here before we get into some of these other questions here. We got 2 questions to get to, but there was something that Don said about the Jets, and I wanted to bring this up again before we move on from it. He said that the Jets have a top 5 running back, top 5 wide receiver, top DBs, and 2 of the top D linemen. So he thinks they are a top group. And I would just counter that. And I already kind of mentioned it to him in the chat. But first of all, Breece Hall was a very good player 2 years ago before he tore his ACL last year. We do not know he's going to come back and do the same thing. And he's the only running back on that roster who's any good. So there's that. And also, they have one good receiver in Garrett Wilson. That's not a top 5 receiver. He's definitely not a top 5 receiver, in my opinion. Look no further than the fact that when he didn't have Rodgers throwing to him last year, he played like shit, in my opinion. So
I will battle. I will fight back a little bit on that one.
I think Garrett Wilson's overrated.
Wilson is a top 10 wide receiver.
I don't think so. I think he's overrated.
He just hasn't. That guy can perform. He puts up numbers without anybody to throw them. He was a top 5 fantasy wide receiver with Zach Wilson throwing him the ball.
Well, I think he's a little overrated. I definitely don't think he's as good as DJ Moore. If that's the argument he's trying to make there.
DJ Moore, even though he is rated higher on that 100 list. But
the one thing I will say, Don, and agree with you with that you said is that their D line is very good. The Jets do have a phenomenal defense line. Quinnen Williams is an absolute effing monster. That guy is one of the best interior defensive linemen in the entire league. And that is the one area that they have that I do feel like is very good is that defensive line. Their offensive line's a joke. They haven't been able to stay healthy, and the guys that they draft are terrible. Mekhi Becton, give me a break. Come on, guys. I mean, that's why they keep drafting offensive linemen every year. We'll see what Fasanu does, but they're not very good. So we'll see about that. If they can't protect Rodgers, they're not going to do nothing. So that's just my opinion on that. Let's get to these last couple comments and questions here before we go. Fire Breathing Rabbit. By the way, that's an interesting name. I'm kind of curious where you came up with that from, but he says that the benefit of the Lakefront Stadium, and this is in regards to what we were talking about earlier, the Lakefront Stadium has a more valuable long-term panache, which is how cool it looks both from the outside as another jewel on the lakefront and from the inside due to the view of downtown, famous for its architecture. And we kind of touched on that a little bit. I think having the view of the Chicago skyline is really, really cool, and I think that's a great thing, and it would be really nice to have. And it does have its benefits being on the lakefront, like you said, because, you know, you've got that long-term panache. You've got the way it looks and all these things. You got people in Chicago who would probably want it there. I just think that the overall benefits of having it in Arlington Heights, outside of the fact you already paid $300 million for the thing, is the fact that you're going to own it and you can do whatever you want with it. And you can literally turn it into basically a plaza. You can turn it into your own little shopping center, you know, food, eateries, and all that kind of stuff. So I just think that's the biggest benefit to this is the fact that they can do whatever they want with that area. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Tim, before I get this last question on here, or this last comment, I should say?
I think you hit it all there. It's like I said, I agree with his statement, fire breathing statement, but at the same time, I just think there's too many. The pros outweigh the cons to build in Arlington Heights. They just do. Go ahead, Jeff.
And so the last comment here, Jigsaw makes, he was in agreement with me earlier. He says exactly, Bears have a new offensive scheme and a rookie quarterback. That's fine if they get a lower rating. Have to see what they can produce in the regular season. Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head there, Jigsaw. I think that they have to go out there and prove it. They have to show that they're what they're capable of is who they actually are. And yeah, they do have. I wouldn't say it's a totally new offensive scheme because they're running the same scheme they had before, but it's going to be different. There's going to be nuances to it and different things that they do because it's a different offensive coordinator. Waldron's going to do things differently than Getsy did. I don't expect to see 150,000 screens every game like we did before with Getsy. I expect to see a little bit more creativity within the offense, not just in the opening drive either, throughout the game with his concepts and with the different things he likes to run. If you guys haven't had a chance, go back and see some of the stuff he was doing in Seattle. It's pretty cool, and it's really creative. And like just some of the different, there's some tight end delay plays that he ran that I think is going to be great for Cole Kmet. I think we're going to see some really cool things out of that. So if you want to add anything to that, Tim, go ahead. But I just think that it's going to be, I do think that we do have to show on the field that they're capable of, or that they are what they're capable of, if that makes sense.
I don't disagree at all. I've agreed with that for the whole time. My point was just that the exercise was on paper, and I felt like they weren't doing the Bears any justice for what they have on paper. And ironically to that, we're talking about having a rookie quarterback. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Caleb Williams is the highest rated player on that Bears roster on PFF's rankings. And when it showed DJ Moore was an 89.3 or something like that. And Caleb Williams was a 90.8. So I thought that was a little bit ironic that they're rating the quarterback that high without ever seeing him. Yet the team was rated as the 20th best team on paper, or the roster in general. But I'll get off that topic. I know I've kind of beat it like a dead horse, but I don't know. I kind of feel like that's just, the Bears don't get enough respect in some areas. But again, I don't disagree. They have to prove it, and they've yet to do that so far. But, at the same time, I really love what Ryan Poles has done with this team and how he's changed this culture. And, Matt Eberflus changed the culture for the players, but just the way that Ryan Poles has given this organization a fresh new outlook, and how he's kind of taken it under his wing and turned it into what a championship caliber team looks like. We're not there yet, but I believe that we're on the way there, and he's done what is necessary to get us there, where other general managers and other presidents and other people of the sort have not done the same thing for this organization. And everybody's kind of just stayed with the whole status quo of what the Bears have done over the years. And I just believe this is a nice, fresh new outlook and a way of doing things that I believe is really going to take us to that promised land. And I really hope that it happens. But
one more thing before we close this out, Tim, Don, I just want to mention Don's comment in here, because like I said, he comes on here. He's our resident Lions fan, and he does make a lot of comments in here that are against what we want to hear a lot of the times. And he says, all jokes aside, great show, guys, especially since it's dry season for football. And I mentioned in the chat, Don, that we do appreciate your support and your input. And a big reason for that is because it can't all be cake and ice cream. We can't be blowing smoke up each other's asses all the time. We appreciate having a different view and a different angle and something to argue with us about, really, because like I said, if it's just all positivity all the time, we're going to be in for a long road some of these years and some of these weeks of the season. So we do appreciate your input and the fact that you always have something different to say, that, is the fact you're a Lions fan. So we do appreciate what you have to say, and we appreciate you being here all the time, even though we joke about the fact that you're not on many Lions podcasts because you're spending so much time here with us. So, but anyways, we ran out of time, but we appreciate you guys as always. Before we go, just a quick reminder to please give us a like here on the video so we can keep bringing you good content. You can give us a follow both here on YouTube and on Twitter. That's at Barroom Network. You can follow Tim at Tim Willis 24. You can follow me at _Jeff Willis. And I'm not even going to read that chat from Aldo there, but that's pretty funny. That's directed at Don. So anyways, guys, like I said, we appreciate you, and we can't wait to bring you guys more stuff in the future. Next week is 4th of July week, so I doubt we'll have a show, but be on the lookout in the future for episodes coming up here in the next few weeks. But like I said, guys, again, thanks, and as usual, bear down.
Put 'em up. Put 'em up.
The Willis Twin Towers podcast is a Barroom Network production. Jeff and Tim Willis are the co-hosts and co-producers. Aldo Gandia is executive producer. Music is licensed from Pond 5. Any copyrighted material used was done under the Fair Use Doctrine for commentary, criticism, and informative purposes. All of our programming is available in audio-only format by subscribing to the Barroom Network wherever you download podcasts. Videos are archived on YouTube.